Good evening, everybody, and thank you for listening. I'm Professor Jen. Thank you to Captioning Services for everything you do for us. Looking at us in the video is Melanie Blow, a dear friend, dear colleague, a partner in crime, so to speak.
Yep.
And I'm in the background. You don't see me. I'm the voice from beyond, but it's a small filming studio. So I always like my guests to have first run of being in the picture show, shall we say. And Melanie and I are together tonight. It's almost New Year's Eve, 2016, going into 2017. And we're just having a brief discussion tonight for people that are in women in crime, prostitution and vice, seminar on sexual violence, and all the other good stuff that I teach. And tonight, Melanie and I are just going to dialogue back and forth because we have similar experiences, yet we don't really embark on a particular subject very often, and the subject really has to do with self-care, and when you're doing advocacy and when you've been a victim of crime like Melanie and I have been, and we go out and we tell our story and we work with other people who have been victims of crime, and we try to be encouraging, and we encourage people to tell their story accurately so they can get the best results in informing and educating other people. But what people don't tell people like Melanie and I is that sometimes it takes a lot of energy to put yourself in a position after even many years later having been victimized, and then you go to tell it. It can sometimes really, as we say, I think Winnie the Pooh said, it can take the stuffing out of you, So
Yes.
Melanie, So Melanie, have you ever had an experience where you've been invited to a conference or an educational piece, and they can't wait to get their hands on you, so to speak, and somebody might ask you a question, they're well-intending and they're not trying to be probing, but as you're answering the question, you're starting to get that sinking feeling in your stomach all over again because you'd like it to be over. Have you ever dealt with it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the first rules I learned as I was really in recovery is that it's not completely linear. It's not like if something does trigger you, it means it's all over. It means you're not actually recovered. It means, you can't get worked up about that. Mm-hmm. You can't judge yourself too harshly for it. Mm-hmm. And I found that recognizing that is actually helpful because then it's like, okay, I'm not doing well right now, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to be doing well in half an hour. Mm-hmm. That I found has been very helpful. Usually, if you're in a situation like that, these are people who are trying to be nice. I mean, they're people who are trying to learn something.
Right, they're embracing. It's not like you feel like you're going to be attacked and ridiculed.
Right.
It's sort of an embracing crowd.
Yeah, and then usually if you can be you can be honest enough and just say, okay, this is a little bit hard for me to talk about. Here goes. Just that little bit of honesty communicates a lot, and it makes you feel a little bit better because it compartmentalizes what you're going through at that moment.
Can you imagine what a lot of the women that I work with that have been convicted of crime must feel like when they come out of prison? Because I feel like I can relate. They come out of prison, they're trying to go on a job interview.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I mean, and then all of a sudden, like in 5 minutes, you've never met somebody before, and in the first 5 minutes, you've got to tell them all your dirty laundry.
Yeah.
And you're trying to sell yourself into a job. And here you and I are not in that particular situation. We're trying to be embraced.
Right.
And validated, and we're trying to be treated kindly. And we're not asking for anything. Can you imagine if you're on the other side of that coin and you've committed a crime and you're a victim at the same time, and yet you're looking for somebody to hire you?
Yeah, I know. Honestly, even if they get to the point of a job interview, they're statistically, they're doing pretty well.
Right.
But yeah, that certainly is not easy nor comfortable for
No.
anybody.
Can you imagine the
Anybody.
interviewer? Can you imagine the interviewer who's not prepared because so many people leave off that they've been convicted of a crime, and they leave that box unchecked, and here they've got an attractive woman in front of them who can speak in cogent sentences, has a college degree, and then all of a sudden the interviewer finds himself sitting with a convicted felon or a convicted misdemeanor, and they don't know how to react either.
Yeah, I've never thought about it from that point of view. I can only imagine.
That's why you and I sit together on even doing these tapings. Yeah. But very often I've done trainings for workforce development where they've invited me to come in to speak to the people that are doing the interviewing of people like you and I, who something might come out in a job interview where we might say we're not comfortable working with a certain population or being locked in or whatever, or they might be speaking to an ex-offender. And I work and I do these trainings, and sometimes I can just see the jaw drop as I'm doing the training because I realize that people were never prepared to be poised in front of an inmate or an ex-offender right there. It's just something that, and the funny thing is that I read something in a federal statistic that it said in this federal statistic that 1 out of every 4 food service worker in the United States is a convicted felon.
I can believe that.
Yeah, because who else? So
right.
People.
It's low-paying, miserable work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe that.
And many of them don't have to handle cash.
Yeah.
Or a credit card.
Yeah.
So grilling hamburgers and French fries seems to be an opportunity. But the thing is that so many of us walk around thinking we've never met a former inmate. And quite frankly, the majority of the people who seem to be cooking hamburgers that we're eating know more about us in our day than a majority of the other people because that's the jobs that they're able to get. Or another example I think about is people in the trades. I have met so many men in the past 20-something years in my career that have all been in the trades. They're house painters, they work outdoor construction, because they learn these trades while they're doing time or on probation, and it's really something that they can really work alone or in a small group and move on to another job. But can you imagine how you and I must feel when we're trying to be embraced by an audience and we feel nervous and maybe a little self-conscious, and then on the flip side of that coin there are people that have done an awful lot of time that are also looking to be embraced. I think that they would suffer the same kinds of, profuse sweating, the pit in the stomach, a sleepless night before an interview.
Yeah, and that worry, that anxiety when you say the one thing that's a little bit wrong and then your thoughts start racing and oh my God, it's all over, da 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 da. And those are things that you train yourself out of whether it's in public speaking, whether it's just like therapy as a survivor. You kind of can train yourself out of all of those and the same thing goes when you're actually doing a job interview or public speaking or anything else. People who are interviewing should ideally also get some training in stuff like that. I mean, if they are impressed enough with somebody's resume that they're giving them an interview, they should really listen to what they say. That's the goal. And especially if this person comes up dressed properly and seems to know what they're doing, they should listen to them.
You would think ideally, but what happens sometimes in these cockamamie interviews, the interviewer makes up a reason why the interview has to be ceased. And they get up and they bolt out of their own office.
I'm sure.
And I've had former clients call me up with, Jen, the interviewer is literally left me in their office. What am I supposed to do? Do I wait for them to come back? Do I clean the place? Well, I don't understand why I'm here. And then I'll say, well, it's best to leave as soon as possible because the person is obviously so petrified, freaked out. And then it sort of beckons the question: do they then write a thank you note? What are you thanking the person for that they like got up and had a complete meltdown
Yeah.
because you went to an interview and they weren't prepared, that you went and told them that you robbed a bank or you disfigured your ex-wife or
Yeah.
whatever you did.
Well, and yeah, here's a little a word of to the wise about what management is like when you guys get out into the world. Yeah, most people who get into the lower echelons of management in any company don't get much training at all about being a manager. You do well at your job, whatever that is, so they assume that automatically means you're a manager. And you get very, very, very little training, if any, about things like interviewing and leafing through resumes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely understand how that does happen. It's horrible, but I get it.
Or the worst case scenario, probably to somebody eloping out of their own office and leaving the interviewee there, is when they stop speaking. Like the person is so shell shocked that they're sitting there with a former inmate or a former victim or a former victim / inmate.
Yeah.
That they've almost ceased their own interview because the interviewer is not prepared. They don't understand where to go next. And I always say to people that if you keep in mind that you just have a human being in front of you, then it really should go very easily. Let me give an example. Look at all the people who are in the medical profession: nurses, doctors, ophthalmologists, dentists, home health aides. If they were to stand there and ask everybody and judge everybody in the matter of the first 3 minutes whether they were an ex-felon, an ex-offender, a victim, and then treat everybody differently, nobody would get the right amount of health care. Because the whole idea of really helping somebody as a first responder, no matter what that position is that it's really the principle first and then the person.
Right.
But you can see where it's very difficult when you're a guest speaker or you're looking for an interview. Sometimes it's not the principal first, it's the person.
Mm-hmm.
You see how that's so hard?
Or really, it's the label. It's not even the person, it's the label. And that is, I mean, labels have a lot of power. And you can, and you should teach yourself to get over that to the greatest extent possible. But that's not to say you still won't see an unexpected one and get thrown a curveball once in a while.
And that's hard. That's, it's a hard thing, I think, when you do guest speaking. And sometimes the person who books you for a conference has a completely different agenda from why you think you're there. And that's a nightmare.
That's never happened to me, but I've seen it happen, and I can imagine.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but that definitely would have been a pack of cigarettes. That's a nightmare.
I'm sure, yeah.
And I think it's a nightmare for people in general to be a good speaker as well as a good receiver. Mm-hmm. And especially when it's uncomfortable topics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Melanie, can you give us 3 pieces of advice if you have them? Like, what do you do for self-care? Like, when you feel like maybe you need to be a little kinder to yourself, what can you impart to the people out here that are listening to these lecture casts? What are the 3 things you would say? I only picked 3 arbitrarily, but what are some of the things that you do for self-care to manage your emotions, manage how you're feeling, manage your reaction to circumstances? What would you say you do that's successful for you?
In general, certain lifestyle things. Exercise is huge for me.
Very big.
Yeah, I just got a gym membership for the first time, and I'm really enjoying it because my schedule and whatnot used to work that I could exercise at home a lot. And now my house is different.
And you know what the funny thing is? Here, even the Department of Corrections recognizes exercise, because even people who are in isolation and seclusion are entitled to 30 minutes a day of recreation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, comparatively speaking, in all forms of life, I really can't think of any kind of demographic that says exercise is not a good way to
Yeah.
manage. Yeah, so
Exactly.
that's one way you handle all of these kinds of things. What's another strategy you use?
Just to really, especially if I do something like to understand my own triggers
Uh-huh.
and to understand my own responses
Mhm.
and to be forgiving with that.
To yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
If I know that something is like when I'm lobbying and I may be potentially telling my story a dozen times or just talking about spending 8 solid hours talking about child sexual abuse or something like that, that is that can be very stressful. So I try to at least make sure that I'm going to do some things that I like, some things that are fun and de-stressful, work that into the day. I mean, I don't do it anymore, but I used to bring a jump rope with me and
Really?
just would, yeah, because I mean it's small, it's portable,
Yeah.
it's very, very, very
And
vigorous.
You can burn off, right?
Right, just burn
yeah.
off that nervous energy.
Right.
I used to do that. Now I don't so much, but you know, again, try to make time for exercise. If I'm staying in the hotel, I'll have the Cartoon Network on, and so that you know it's not something I don't watch much TV when I'm home, so it's kind of a treat for me,
Right.
and it's just kind of a different thing.
Well, it's a way to decompress.
Yeah, it is.
It's like a departure from your everyday routine. Because I too, like I'll do different things. Like I'll drink different kinds of herbal tea, or I'll try and listen to some CD from the 1990s from my big hair days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my Aquanet days. Or I'll do something very self-care directed. You know, maybe light some candles and
Yeah.
have some kind of aromatherapy. Or the other thing that I'm famous for, and I only do when I'm in the car alone, is called the scream on top of my lungs.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well,
like the amazing scream, you know? Like
Yeah.
I can petrify myself. Or, you know, you start singing, you know, in the car as loud as you can because you know nobody's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, again, when I'm driving to and from Albany, I do a lot of that.
Right.
I mean,
a lot of time.
I listen to music that's largely is very cathartic. I think we
Right.
all kind of gravitate towards things that are therapeutic for us.
Right.
And that's one of the ones for me is the kind of music that I listen to. And so you might listen to 4 hours of that, and it does loosen you up a lot.
Absolutely. Except when you get out of the car going to the conference and
you're hoarse. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. You can't get one word out because you have no voice left.
Yeah, I have actually learned to be careful about that.
Right. So anyway, we're going to wrap up this evening. We wanted to just share with you a brief synopsis of what it is we think we go through and how it is that we can be sort of empathetic to people who maybe have a lot on their resume or their plate that what they go through. Because Melanie, between the two of us, we've been doing this really countless decades already. And I have to only speak for myself. I can't speak for Melanie. But even before I guess speak every kind of situation or dialogue, I always sort of have to mentally prepare myself even just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's never that easy. It's just like never like it's a cinch. I never walk away saying, well, that was nothing.
Right.
Because it was something. So I thank you, Melanie. You're always such a dear. Everybody, I want to put this on tape. Everybody always asks for you. You're a star here in Rochester. You do so much for women especially and the empowerment of children and people who are unfortunate victims. And I wish you all the luck in the world, and I wish someday that you'll be out of a advocacy job, because then that means there's no more victim.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately that's not going to happen because these issues have really come about for thousands of years, and I guarantee they will outlive us both. So God bless you, Melanie, and everybody asks for you all the time, and you'll see much more of Melanie out there, and thank you again, dear.
Yep, thank you.
Of course.
Okay.